What was the very first gun made in America? It's a question that sounds simple, but the answer is far more complex and interesting than you might think. When we imagine the first of anything, we often picture a singular, named invention, a definitive starting point. But the story of firearms in early America isn't about one specific gun. It's about the slow, steady emergence of a new craft in a new world, born from pure necessity. To find the origins of American gunsmithing, we have to travel back to the early 1600s, to the fledgling colonies clinging to the edge of a vast, unknown continent. The first European settlers didn't arrive with a grand plan to create a firearms industry. They brought their skills and tools with them simply to survive. So, who made the first American gun? The earliest firearms produced in what would become the United States were made by colonial gunsmiths. These weren't factory workers. They were skilled artisans, often blacksmiths, with a talent for intricate metalwork. We go on point to a single first, named gun, because these early firearms were entirely handmade, not mass-produced. The concept of a standardized model with a brand name, like a Winchester or a Colt, simply didn't exist yet. Think of it less like a factory assembly line, and more like a master artist creating a one-of-a-kind sculpture. Each gun was a unique piece, tailored to the materials available and the specific skills of its maker. Because of this, pinpointing the single first American gun is impossible. We could go to a museum and see a Colonial Model 1 or a Jamestown Special. What we can do is trace the emergence of American gunmaking as a practice. Historical records and archaeological finds suggest that the first American-made firearms started appearing around the 1620s to the 1640s, primarily in colonies like Virginia and Massachusetts. These early gunsmiths were absolutely essential members of their communities. A reliable firearm wasn't just a weapon for defense against attack. It was a crucial tool for hunting, providing food for families and entire settlements struggling to establish themselves in a harsh, new environment. Initially, these colonial gunsmiths weren't innovators. They were expert imitators. Their primary job was to maintain and repair the firearms that settlers brought over from Europe. When a gun broke, there was no sending it back to the factory. It had to be fixed on the spot, and when new guns were needed, the smiths would replicate the designs they were already familiar with. The guns they produced were heavily based on the models popular in their home countries. An English-trained smith in Massachusetts would naturally produce a musket that looked and functioned just like an English one. A Dutch settler in New Amsterdam, which is now New York, would copy the Dutch designs he knew best. This is why the earliest American firearms are virtually indistinguishable from their European counterparts. At first, they were crafting matchlock muskets. These were heavy, cumbersome weapons that used a slow-burning cord, called a match, which had to be manually lowered into a pan of gunpowder to fire. You can imagine how unreliable that would be in the rain or wind. They were slow to reload, and less than ideal for the unpredictable conditions of the American frontier. A major technological leap came with the flintlock mechanism. This innovation created a spark by striking a piece of flint against a steel plate, igniting the powder much more reliably and quickly. Colonial gunsmiths rapidly adopted this superior technology, and flintlock muskets and rifles became the standard firearm for generations. They were a game-changer for life in the colonies. The materials used to make these guns were often a mix of imported and local resources. High-quality steel for barrels, and the intricate lock mechanisms was difficult to produce in the colonies, so it was often imported from Europe. However, the gunsmiths would use local wood, like the beautiful and strong maple or walnut, to carve the stocks. This blend of Old World parts and New World materials was one of the first steps toward creating something uniquely American. Over time, as their skills developed and their understanding of the local environment grew, these craftsmen began to adapt their designs. They weren't just copying anymore. They were starting to make small but significant changes to suit the specific needs of colonial life. Maybe they'd adjust the stock for better balance or tweak the sights for more accurate hunting in dense forests. This slow process of adaptation was the seed from which a uniquely American firearms tradition would eventually grow. These early, unnamed guns became more than just tools. They became symbols of self-reliance, independence, and the rugged spirit of a new nation being forged in the wilderness. The ability to create and maintain your own means of defense and sustenance was at the very core of the colonial mindset. So, while we may never know the name of the man who hammered out the very first gun on American soil, we can appreciate the collective effort of these anonymous artisans. They laid the foundation for centuries of American firearm history, from the Kentucky long rifle that helped win the frontier to the modern innovations we see today. Their legacy isn't a single object locked away in a museum, but a rich tradition of craftsmanship and innovation that continues to this day. They were the first chapter in a long and complex story, built not in a factory, but in the small, smoky workshops of the American colony. In the late 18th century, a young nation, fresh from the fires of revolution, faced a critical challenge: how to defend itself without relying on foreign powers. The answer was forged not just in political ideals, but in iron and wood at a brand new facility in Massachusetts. This is the story of America's first official firearm, the Springfield Model 1795 musket. Before this gun, the American military was a logistical nightmare. Soldiers carried a jumble of weapons: French muskets, captured British Brown Besses, and personal hunting arms. Imagine trying to supply ammunition and parts for dozens of different guns on a chaotic battlefield. It was unsustainable. President George Washington knew this. He personally chose the site for a national armory in Springfield, Massachusetts. In 1794, its mission was clear: create a standardized, reliable firearm made right here in the United States. And just a year later, they delivered. The Springfield Model 1795 wasn't a radical new invention. It was a smart, pragmatic choice based on a proven design. The French Charleville Model 1763. American soldiers and gunsmiths were already very familiar with the France had supplied thousands of them during the Revolutionary War, and they had served the Continental Army well. By copying this design, the Springfield Armory could get production up and running quickly, ensuring a dependable weapon for the nation's troops. So, what was this gun like? The Model 1795 was a .69 caliber, smoothbore, flintlock musket. It was a beast of a weapon, measuring over 5 feet long with its bayonet attached, and weighing around 10 pounds. In an era before rifling was common in military arms, its effective range was short. You could reliably hit a man-sized target at about 50 to 75 yards. But the real power came from volley fire, where hundreds of soldiers would fire at once, creating a deadly wall of lead. The weapon was built tough, with a full-length walnut stock and heavy iron components. It had to be, because in the brutal, close-quarters combat of the day, a musket often became a club when there was no time to reload. The establishment of the Springfield Armory, and soon after, a second armory at Harper's Ferry, Virginia, was a massive industrial undertaking for the young United States. Between the two armories, they would produce over 160,000 of these muskets. This wasn't just about making guns. It was about building a domestic manufacturing base from the ground up, proving that America could be. While both armories followed the same basic pattern, small differences in their production methods mean that collectors today can distinguish between a Springfield-made musket and one from Harper's Ferry. The Model 1795 didn't just sit in an armory, it went to work shaping the nation. It was the primary infantry weapon during the turbulent first few decades of the 19th century. It saw action in the Quasi-War with France and the First Barbary War against pirates off the coast of North Africa. General Mad Anthony Wayne's troops carried it at the Battle of Fallen Timbers, a victory that helped secure the Northwest Territory for American settlement. And most famously, it was the gun that armed the American soldier during the War of 1812. From the defense of Fort McHenry in Baltimore, where the Star-Spangled Banner was written, to Andrew Jackson's stunning victory at the Battle of New Orleans, the Model 1795 was there. But its service wasn't limited to the battlefield. When Lewis and Clark set out on their incredible journey across the continent from 1804 to 1806, the Model 1795 was the firearm they carried. It provided them with defense against unknown threats and allowed them to hunt for food in the vast, untamed wilderness of the American West. The musket was their lifeline, a crucial tool for survival on one of history's greatest expeditions. Even as newer, improved flintlock models began to appear, The Model 1795 continued to serve. It remained in the hands of militia units and soldiers stationed at remote frontier outposts well into the 1830s. Its service life spanned nearly 40 years, a remarkable testament to its robust and reliable design. It was a bridge from the Revolution to the era of westward expansion. This is why the Springfield Model 1795 is so much more than just an old gun. It is widely considered the first true American gun, produced by the United States government for its own soldiers. Its creation was a declaration of industrial and military independence. In its polished steel and seasoned walnut, the young nation forged a symbol of its sovereignty, and its determination to stand on its own 2 feet. It represented a crucial step away from being a loose collection of former colonies and towards becoming a unified nation, ready to make its mark on the world. The Springfield Model 1795 isn't just a piece of military hardware. It's a foundational artifact of the American story, embodying the spirit of self-reliance that it was built to protect. Thanks for joining us on this journey back in time. If you found this story fascinating, be sure to like this video and subscribe for more deep dives into the history of incredible machines and moments. We'll see you on the next one.